I'm Sean O'Neill and welcome to my weekly podcast where I chat to the key figures who shape and lead their industries. Today my guest is Nicola Docking.
I think I'm a much better MD because I'm a mum. No client could shout at me as badly as my daughter.
What was the headline?
Woman dislocates jaw eating burger, like it's in the Daily Mail or the Guardian, it's everywhere.
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, who are you and what do you do?
So I am Nicola Docking, and I am the Managing Director of Poke. So Poke is a creative marketing agency based on Bold Street in Liverpool, and we work very closely with you. So yeah, and I've been MD since August last year, but I've actually been with Poke since it started.
Since the start,
yeah. So funnily enough, when I first started with Poke, I did 2 jobs. And so until August last year, I was actually balancing the 2 roles. So it's been a big change, but a really positive change, I think, for both me and Poke, me going full time. Just because I think we've got that consistent leadership in the office now, which it's really hard, when things start off and it's just, as you know, snowballed in a way that I don't think any of us imagined it would. And so it became apparent we were getting bigger than could be managed on this kind of part-time leadership basis. So
I think the story of Poke is a very sort of common story between 4 guys that get in a room and have probably big egos or aren't very organised.
Yeah.
So me, Andrew, Mark and
I've come in as your mum.
Yuri got in the room and says, I'm looking for a marketing company to work with, all these businesses. And we all, 4 guys in there going, yeah, we can deliver. Little structure, all with their own skill sets. And at the start, it was just all, we moved forward, but it was a bit chaotic without the
chaos is probably the word.
Yeah, well, chaos is an understatement. But yeah, we all knew what we wanted to achieve, and as I say many, many times, it's about finding the right people to fit into the right place. And somehow, whenever you came in,
it was the right time.
It was order. You brought structure and order to say, well, that's what you're good at. Just stick it what you're good at. That's what you're good at. And all of us sort of then went from sort of being too involved in the business to stepping back.
I think it's really interesting because I think across, even in the last 4 years and in my entire career of working in marketing, you do see agencies popping up all over the city, and effectively there's kind of 2 routes that you get: freelancers who are freelancers and they sort of position it as an agency and they position it in that way, and they have sort of a level of jobs. Now, I know that none of you guys, and particularly with Poke, wanted Poke to be that. Poke from the beginning, the vision was that it was going to be a kind of a big agency with big clients. But the challenge of living that on day one to where we are, 4 years later, is completely different. So it's obviously, it's kind of changed, it's evolved over the time. What services we offer has evolved based on what clients have needed. I think maybe there was a little bit of internal, what services should have been offered and shouldn't at the beginning. But I think now we've really established a real position for ourselves, particularly in the city. And I think we offer something that was missing, which is a really nice position to be in. But it is interesting when you use the word marketing, because I think it means so much to so many different people. And we, less and less so now, because I think people can see the case studies on our website and can see the sort of work that we do. But I think initially people come to you and they think, you must do SEO because you're an agency. Now we do.
And marketing's so varied.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like saying you're an entrepreneur. How there's so many variations of that. You're a businessman. You're a marketing expert. Marketing is so many sub sectors in it. It's just incredible.
100%. And we had 2. I had left agencies for a few years, which I could probably talk about in a bit about my other job, which was very different and a complete change. But I'd left agencies, and I know the other guys that we set up Poke with had also left agencies for a couple of years. And when we went back into doing this, we had quite strict. We were like, look, we'll do this, and we really want to do this, but there's things we don't want to do. We've all been slightly scarred, and we've all been we've all worked at fantastic agencies, but we've also worked at ones that we haven't enjoyed. And one of the key things for me was I never wanted us to promise stuff we can't do, because I think we'd all worked at agencies, and I get why, and I particularly get why at those early days where every penny you desperately need in, but it's just so difficult. It's so difficult for reputation, but also for the staff delivering it. We've all been on that end of it where someone's sold in something and they've gone, just don't worry about it, you'll figure it out. So for example, marketing and PR often blur, and I know a lot of agencies that say, oh well, PR's easy, we can do that, send out a couple of press releases, but it's so undervaluing what PR is, and it's not in our skill set. The same with we don't do media, we don't do all kind of the Google ads and that type of stuff. We know some great partners that we can work with that do, but it's not something, if I come back to my team and I say we've sold this even for X amount of money, if I'm then expecting them to deliver it, what happens is it's so damaging to the client relationship, because the client comes in really happy, really excited, they've been sold this dream, and the further you get down the line and it becomes apparent that these poor staff that are trying their best but haven't got skill set to do that, it ends up really damaging the relationship.
From the moment I met you, I knew that was probably the highest thing in your agenda.
Yeah, we offer what we offer, and we do what we offer really, really well.
But is that something that can be taught, or is that be something that you've always had?
I think it's something that...
Could you get torn? The pound signs does take you away from...
It's definitely
blurs the lines of what you could deliver.
Definitely a lesson I've learned, and particularly from Andrew, who is my friend and colleague. He is very good at saying, don't devalue your product. You know what you're offering, and so don't then go in and say, well, we can do this for X or we can do that for less. We know that what we offer, even if it doesn't include every single part of the marketing spectrum, we know what we offer has real, genuine value, and we know the people we've recruited are to fit into that and what we offer. So we know for 100% that if people come to us for a branding project, we can deliver that perfectly, and there won't be hiccups, and we have fantastic client relationships, much better than I've had at other agencies, and I do feel it's for that reason. But I do think we've kind of come to this realization because that's not always been the case at other places we've worked potentially. So that was really important to us. But secondly was we wanted, and it was kind of something that was said flippantly, we had an away day, but it's become quite a target for us, is that we want to be a place where people in Liverpool will say, I want to work there. So if you're a creative in Liverpool, we want people to say Poke is the place to get a job.
Well, that happened very quick, because we're now, our desks are full.
Yeah, that is what keeps me awake at night, desk space.
Yeah, and there was a moment where we thought our office was nearly too big, and now it's completely full, jam packed.
Yeah, and it is really nice to have to be in that position.
There's endless stories where people tell me great things about you, but before we go back to how you created your identity and the story of how you got to where you are now, tell us some of the recent projects that Poke has delivered, because some of them for me are it's amazing how you even got the opportunity, never mind deliver, and then never mind deliver with so much praise afterwards.
It is. We're really proud of the things that are coming out now, and what's been lovely is that I'd say last year there were so many projects in the background that we couldn't talk about yet, and finally this year they're all going live, so we feel like there's a lot to talk about now. So we've just had Liverpool Cathedral, the big one, not the Catholic
Anglican.
one, the Anglican Cathedral has gone live. That went live at the start of January. So that was a complete rebrand. We worked with their team. They have an absolutely brilliant in-house team, and the relationship we formed is really nice, because I think we equally feel as proud as, agency and client feel as proud as what's been produced. But it was absolutely great. We must have met every single person at the Cathedral, from the person that ran the cafe to the organist. We've spoke to everyone, because the brand had to represent every single person that has kind of any kind of stake in that business, and it does. And I think the challenge for that one, and I think we've navigated it well with the brand we've produced, is that the Cathedral is a business, it is a brand, it is in the same way that anywhere else is, but there's that kind of what's the word, like resistance to it by some of the congregation, because obviously, you know, yeah, well, it's like a house of God, and they don't feel like necessarily it should be considered as a brand, but it is, and you know, you have to keep the lights on, so you have to make money, and it's in, you know, it's, as well as all those great things they do, and it's a living, breathing, active religious space. There's services there every day, but it also is a tourism venue, and some of the things, so it's balancing those things, and it's keeping different audiences happy. You know, the Cathedral were quite keen to bring in a slightly younger audience as well as their sort of core older audience members. So we did have a little bit of
Andrew told me the story about the phone call.
Yes, yeah. So we have had a slight bit of negativity from some of the older members of the congregation.
Actually perfect.
Yeah,
he said it worked out because
yeah.
I'd like you to tell me that story, because Andrew reminded me this morning about it. But he said it was perfect because 50% loved the rebrand,
yeah,
and some of the, you know, longer term members really disliked it. But one of them rang Andrew with sort of an angry voice
member of the congregation saying that they really hated it, and they were the thing was they were quite apologetic about hating it. Like they weren't angry, they rang up saying like I really wanted to love it, but I really hate it. But from our point of view, hating it, we don't want anything neutral. If we'd launched it and there'd been no reaction, then we haven't done enough, we've not pushed it far enough. You know, that's what has launched is a year's worth of work on both our side and the Cathedral's side. So if we launch that and no one even notices that we've done it, then it's a waste. You know, it's a change. To go through that process, they've reached a point where they're saying what we have doesn't serve us, and we need a change, and we need something new. We need kind of a sort of oomph to come and make it a change to our business. So in doing that, there has to be some positive and negative, and there has to be people that don't like change, and there has to be all of those things, and it has to be up for discussion. But one of the key challenges we have as a business is that the logo is such a small part of what we do, but publicly and visually, it's kind of the biggest thing of what we do. It's what people see, and when people hear the word brand, they just think logo. They don't realise the stuff we've done behind the scenes, like the tone of voice, speaking to all the volunteers about how they guide people through the cathedral, all the signage, all the various things, the colours, the website, everything that encompasses that brand and experience that people get when they walk into the cathedral. Is not just the logo, but the logo has to be a noticeable and memorable ident. And one of the things that people was a criticism of the logo we did come up with, which I do personally love, but you never know, you know, when you've looked at something for a year, it is interesting releasing it into the world. But is that it's quite bold, and people said it lost the intricacies of the design of the cathedral. But we could never replicate that into a logo, and it wouldn't be right. Like the logo isn't just the cathedral shrunk down. That isn't the point of it. It's got to work at scale. It's got to work if it's an app icon. It's got to work if it's on a billboard. It's got to be something that is flexible enough to work as a brand, but also represents kind of the whole experience of being there. So for the cathedral, we came up with the brand theme of look up. So if you do one thing when you walk into the cathedral, look up. Because when you walk in, like obviously that is the most incredible thing you can do. And so practically looking up, but also, you know, look up to God, look up to being open, keep your mind open, look up to learn. Like we must have done every tour the cathedral
I think that's a lesson
offers.
For life, not just the cathedral.
Yeah, no, it is, it's true. But we must have done every tour the cathedral have going now. Like I could be a tour guide. If Poke goes wrong, then that will be my destiny. But they do all sorts of like tours for, if you're a fan of the Beatles, you can tell them and they'll point out Beatles things. If you're American, they'll point out American money that's been spent, and it's absolutely amazing, like what they do. So the idea behind the logo was to encompass that whole, and the whole brand was encompass that idea of exploration. So the logo, when it's in animation, kind of grows out of the ground, and it's symbolise that height and that kind of the whole look up idea. And it's not as explicit as every time someone comes in, we don't expect everyone to shout look up at them. And the signage doesn't say look up, but the tour guides, the staff, everyone's kind of had that training now that it's all about getting people to open their eyes and be open to an experience. And that appeases both the tourists and the religious audience. And that's why it's been a nice balance. So I think that's quite a nice case study for me to talk through kind of the work we do at Poke, because I think we are more than just a design agency. Like, our designers are amazing, like absolutely brilliant, and what they do so well is they take the strategy we come up with and they interpret it. Sometimes we come together with strategies and I think, I don't know how they're going to visually interpret this.
You know, it's beautiful
but
when I walk
do.
past and I see everyone's heads buried, and then they turn around and then they're whispering, and they're just, you can see that everybody's in tune.
Yes, very much so. We've got a really nice process. Like, interestingly, that was probably the thing that I think I've probably changed the most.
You've changed a lot. You've changed. We all sleep well knowing you're leading the team now.
But yeah, we brought in a much bigger, more process driven. It's difficult because it is a balance. And I think my family would be very shocked to hear that I am the one that's made it process driven, because I think at home I'm quite disorganized. But
how important was it that Poke was a Liverpool-based agency? Because I know there's huge passion from the start, whenever Poke was just a thought, that it would be Liverpool-based and it would be the leading agency in the city.
Yeah, it was never in question. It was never in question. Like, I used to work for an agency called Ripple Effect, which is one of the ones that I liked. I'll get that on camera. Yeah, I used to work for an agency called Ripple Effect, and they were a huge agency about 10, 12 years ago. There was like 90 of them, and it was a sort of different era where agencies did get that big. But I knew working in the city, and I knew the kind of mindset of the people that do work in the city. I know that kind of shared what I think is starting to work really well in Liverpool, and much better than it did back then, is that kind of collaborative processes. You do see, so we have agencies that on paper should be our competitors, but they're not, and we work really, really well with them. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not sure that whole ethos of me saying we only do what we're good at, I'm not sure we could really live that in another city. I'm speaking in general terms, but I am aware that in Liverpool, if I came to another agency and I said, look, you can do, we'll do it. We work with an agency called Pink. We are Pink, and they do our PR, and we also put them in touch with a lot of our clients to do PR with them. Now, at no point is there ever an issue where some of our businesses do cross over slightly. I know they do a bit of design, they do some websites, and obviously we do websites, but there's just that set relationship where we're able to work really well together. And I do feel, having worked in other cities, that I don't think you'd get that level of openness and collaboration, and there's slightly less fear that, they're going to steal my business or my ideas. And people are quite vocal. We'll talk openly about working with Pink, they'll talk about working with us, whereas previously I think a lot of those things would have been behind closed doors.
There's like a culture of supporting each other, whether you're inside Poke as an employee partner, or you're on the outside working, alongside as a consultant, or as some sort of associate. Now, there's a few young people within Poke that have started. One in particular at the very start, and she's grown right through.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
But you were there, and I think it's quite, there's a lot of younger people now saying, how do I start in something and make sure there's longevity in it, or how do I become like you someday? Because it's maybe easy for her to sit there now and talk about how great the company is, but tell us how your journey started, because you didn't just arrive here one day in this position. You've grafted.
Well, I think interestingly, my career path does influence who we've chose to employ. And when you met the employee you mentioned was Molly, and she's absolutely brilliant, and she came in as an apprentice and she's just flown, and she's now just been promoted to project manager.
It's like she's blossomed.
I know, yeah, she really has. Like, she's absolutely amazing. Funnily enough, we were sent back in the day of COVID, when she applied, she sent a video interview. Like, she sent like a little video, and Andrew forwarded it to me and said, this girl reminds me so much of you when you were 18. And I knew what he meant, because she was so enthusiastic, and that's how I always felt. I always wanted to work.
Energy.
Yeah, so I started I actually wanted to be a journalist really badly, and so I hammered people's doors for work experience, because I'd sort of heard that you couldn't get into journalism unless you had print something printed or work printed. So I got work experience at the Warrington Guardian and just kind of forced them to print my music reviews and that type of thing. I was super, super keen. And then I'd done the work experience, and then they rang me up and said they had a role going in their digital department. So it wasn't actually editorial, but would I be interested? And I was actually in lower sixth at the time. So I was at school still, full-time school. So got my mum to ring up my school, and they agreed that I could have a day off school a week, or they'd schedule things around so I could do this job. Yeah, sign your own planner. They agreed I could have the day off, and I went and did a day a week at this, and it was absolutely, I mean, experience-wise, it was amazing. It put me leaps and bounds ahead of where I would have been, definitely. But interestingly, there was a bus hit a man outside of our office, outside the Warrington Guardian offices. A bus hit this guy.
Very interesting.
And he's going somewhere, this. And everyone ran out, and all the journalists got out pens and paper and started writing and taking pictures. And I was like, is no one going to ring like an ambulance or ring? And I realised I wasn't a journalist. That was the moment, and I just thought, I'm not a journalist. I don't think my brain is wired that way to be a journalist. And it was such a funny,
the caring side.
Yeah, maybe it is, but also I just don't think I think of news in the same way that you'd need to be a journalist. So at that point, I thought that's not for me. So on my one day a week, I asked, could I learn everyone in the office's jobs so that when they were on holiday, I could do their job, because my job was really dull. So all I did, which is probably showing my age, is do you remember Fish for Jobs? It was like a job recruitment site.
I hadn't got internet. I hadn't got anything in the farm when I grew up. So you're way advanced.
So all I was doing was tidying up the HTML of these job ads. So I'd just go through and delete duplications, and I didn't care. I absolutely loved it. I just loved being in an office. I loved the fact that I was working. I loved the fact I was getting experience, and I didn't care. So I then went and learned everyone else's jobs, which were better than mine. But it meant that when they were off, I could cover their job. And it meant when the web editor job came up, which is the one that I wanted, I could go for it, but it came up it came up in my second year of uni, so I hadn't finished uni when that job came up, but it was the job that I actually wanted to do when I left uni. So and I'd sort of balanced the two this whole time, and it had been okay. Like uni, I probably wasn't the most wild student, because I was in work a lot, but I'd managed it okay to that point, and then they offered me this job, and it was basically a full-time job, and I was still at uni, but I thought I can't turn it down because someone else will get it and they're not going to leave in a year. So I thought I'll be fine, I'll do both. And in general I was fine, but occasionally I'd have like a slight meltdown just with the stress. Yeah, occasionally. But yeah,
Is that because you couldn't go to the Blue Angel on a Monday night?
Yeah, I know. I didn't go to Blue Angel on Monday night. But I was saying to you earlier, I did live above the font. So I did get the occasional drink in an evening. But I did, funnily enough, go out loads with my work. So, and I have two really close friends from uni that I am still really, really close to. But I also have this group from the Warrington Guardian that were almost like my growing up years in a different way. Like I just formed that friendship, and we went out after work, and I still had that side of my life. It was just slightly different, and just trying to balance the two. And then I had a number of other jobs, went into agencies, and just kind of kept working my way up. I became a manager, or like a team manager, when I was like 22, which was really hard because when I walked in on my first day, my team were all probably late 20s, and they all said, we don't need a manager. And I was like, oh, great. So that was probably my toughest
Well, I share
job,
that story.
I'd say.
I share that story because when I started my first business, I managed to raise some funds. So I was the funder, the owner, and everything else. And I was early 20s. And when I walked into meetings with 30, 40-year-old people, they stared at me. And like, even though I was employing them, it's so hard for someone so young.
It is. And you are you're slightly trying to change everyone's opinion before you've even opened your mouth.
Yeah, they just look at you and go, this youngster isn't going to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So I had double frustration because I was paying their, consultancy fees or banking fees or accountancy fees, and I'm sure I wasn't maybe as diplomatic back in those days. I probably told them, so that was a very difficult time for me.
It is hard because you haven't got that experience under your belt, so their criticism is you haven't got the experience, and it's sort of true. Right, you haven't, and you are kind of learning as you go along, and that job was particularly hard.
So were you given the job because other people had trusting you and knew that you
Yeah,
were
and I
going
think,
to give your best?
unlike, I had a lot of experience, a lot of work experience, because I was worked since I was 16 in like a, in a media office environment. So I think in some ways, my age was slightly disproportionate for the work experience that I had, but I didn't have like necessarily the life experience or the management experience. And looking back, the company that I was working for had a wildly different management style than I have now and I have learned, and I wouldn't. So it was difficult because I don't think in that environment I had kind of mentors to look up to think I'll manage in this way. But I very quickly realised that was not how I was going to manage. Like there was a lot of tiers and hierarchy, and it was quite a toxic environment. But I think it taught me a lot. In some ways, it was a real crash course in managing people, because I just thought this isn't how I will do it. But then went to Ripple Effect and worked my way up at Ripple Effect, and then I had my children. So I actually have two children. And I remember when I was leaving Ripple Effect to have my children, I didn't want to leave.
Oh, she actually left?
Yeah, when I first was going on maternity leave, I had every intention of coming back, like every intention. I absolutely loved my job. But my job involved a lot of travel, like very different. If it was, pre-COVID, so Zoom and things were just not used. No one did video meets. Everything was in person. So I was away 2-3 nights a week, most weeks. It was unusual if I wasn't away for at least one night a week. We had a lot of clients in Kent. We had a lot of clients in London. We were sort of all over the shop. But I still had every intention of going back in that kind of naive, I hadn't had children yet way. And then the minute I had my daughter, I thought, I can't do both. I can't juggle both. So I approached Ripple Effect about going back in a kind of consultant form or some kind of part-time, but it was slightly different time. Like it's not like now, like flexible working wasn't what it's expected. You can't
jump on a video call.
Yeah, exactly. And I just don't think I could have done the job in the same way that I could. So I ended up going to work for my parents' family business. So they have a wholesale meat company that supplies kind of sausage, bacon, all sorts of food products at cafes.
I'll still be waiting for samples.
Yeah, I know, I will bring some in, I know. It's carrying like a £5 bag of sausage on the train is what's putting me off. But what that taught me I 100% wouldn't be the MD or the managing director I am now without having done that. It changed everything for me. And it's not, I know that if I hadn't have gone down that path, I would have stayed in agencies and I would have worked my way up, and I'm sure I'd probably level-wise be doing the same sort of job, but I think I'd approach it so differently. And one of the main things is that I think I'm just much more empathetic to clients. So I know when you said before about being like young and sort of bullish, and I definitely was, I would come up with this like perfectly written social media strategy that made exact sense. And I knew if they did what I had put, they would get these results. And I'd hand it over and they wouldn't do it. And I'd be like, I'm giving you the answers. Like, why aren't you doing it? Now, having worked particularly in a small business, you just realize like that self kind of obsessed world that agencies can be a little bit, where all we're delivering to that business, but all we're delivering to that business is one project or marketing or one thing, and you're forgetting about the much wider picture. And so having worked in a business, that has completely changed my mindset. Like I'm much more aware now that what we're doing, even if we're doing it perfectly, it has to fit into the day-to-day life of the client and the other pressures they're under.
I've had a recent conversation with a really good friend and someone I work with closely. They said if everyone would just reply to their emails, and my answer was, in the old day I probably thought that, but now it's not. It's the emotional connection. It's talking them through the processes, making sure they're okay. There's so much more than just there's the document, sort it out. Yeah. You don't need to know how it works.
Yeah.
People want to feel like there's some element of importance and engagement and connectivity, and it gets so complex.
Yeah.
If anything, I've started going back and reading the first book I got from Tony Robbins about connectivity and energy, and like some of the basic things that look so cliche. You've got this marketing expert who talks about how we our human needs, and I'm starting to think actually he's maybe more right than the 25-year-old Sean O'Neill who read the book and went, Yeah,
I know
he
better
knows.
than that.
Yeah, I'll just do it my way. He's probably more right. But I'm thinking, is it because I'm getting older as well? Is it starting to, am I starting to realize that, emotionally I can't be that bullish person anymore.
Yeah.
And also because I'm a bit older, I don't need to be, because I can get people to work with me by actually genuinely caring a bit more about, and I'm working towards how they would prefer things to
I
be.
do think you become, as you get older, a lot more empathetic to people in general as well, don't you? I think you understand.
You want to sleep more at night, don't you?
Yeah, that's true. Interestingly, and I think this is probably a slightly not controversial, even though it shouldn't be, position, is I think I'm a much better MD because I'm a mum. And I think a lot of the skills I've learned from being a parent, and I think women aren't allowed to say that, because I think there's a it's like I'm saying other women that aren't mums wouldn't be good MDs, and that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying for me personally, and through my journey, and and the character I was before and the character I am now. And the main reason I think it's made me better, particularly in terms of managing a team, is my two children. Before I had children, I was a great mum. I had all these plans and visions and how I was going to be and what sort of parent I would be. I didn't know what sort of children they'd be, and I was really conscious that I had no control over that, but I thought I was completely able to choose what sort of parent I'd be. And what it's taught me is that you don't, like, they sculpt that, because I am, as much as I try to be the same with them both, I'm not. I'm a different parent to each of them. And what that's taught me is that as a manager, like, I can read all the books I want in the world and I can make this decision as the sort of manager I want to be. But really, I don't control what sort of manager I am. The person I'm managing controls the sort of person that I am.
It's not one size fits all.
No, definitely not. And I am very different to the different members of my team, kind of depending on what needs they had. And again, I think I'm much more empathetic to their needs and kind of work with how they, to try and get the best out of them. Whereas I do definitely think maybe, like you said, 25-year-old me would have been kind of, this is the style, I've got experience, I know I'm right. And there's an element, they still need a team to lead. I am a strong believer that you can't, it's not like by committee. You can't manage an organisation by committee, because it just won't work. There has to be leadership. I think the team like having someone to look to and feel there's a strategy and direction of the business, and that we're all rowing in the same way and someone's leading that. But I think there has to be that kind of individual element. And I think as well, like no client could shout at me as badly as my daughter. So so that's definitely helped. I think I'm quite fearless now in terms of anything going wrong, and I'm sort of a little bit more laid. I think I've always been quite laid back. I'm quite a laid back person, but I think I used to put a lot more pressure on myself in work to be a bit more or a bit less laid back. And now I think I don't have capacity to think of it that differently. Like, I have to be the same person consistently, because I just don't have the time to not. I'm always rushing between these different roles that I have. And I think I've just kind of merged my personality now to address both, if you get what I mean.
In recent times, the first MSO event, someone asked my mum, my mum happened to be there, and someone asked my mum at the end, how did you raise such a great son? And my mum says, I just treated him and gave him as much love as I could. I found out this weeks later, and I thought, that's a beautiful answer, really.
Yeah, that is lovely.
But in my sort of, where I've gone in life is, I was given all that love and all that protection. So then I found, as I went along, I found people who I looked up to that, who are my role models today, but they were a little bit more tougher, straight to the point, a bit more regimented, equally as kind, but when it comes down to getting the job done, tough love and some tough lessons along that way, which again has shaped me, but been a very interesting time. And now I'm back to this. So I sort of copied them, the tough love position, and I implemented that a lot in my. Why don't you reply to your emails?
Yeah.
What do you mean you need a weekend off? Well, it's 9 o'clock at night and you didn't answer your phone. Like, how are we ever going to succeed if you don't? But because I was that way and I pushed myself to the limit, I thought the only way to succeed is to get everyone to do that. Along the way, I'm sure I broke a lot of people. People wanted to leave. There was burnout was mentioned a lot of times in conversations, and now I've then gone back to realise, and as you've just said, some people do want to be pushed. Some people do want to do the 80-hour, 90-hour weeks. But also there's the people that just need to be sort of loved, and just let them do the 40-hour week. And that 40-hour week will be so productive, and they'll be with you, and so we're both saying the same thing. And even for my peace of mind, it's so nice that I can figure out now who needs the hug, who needs to be
definitely. Slightly. Well, yeah, I was really lucky. Like my parents, probably sound very similar to your mum, but the one thing I give them a lot of credit for, and particularly in raising daughters, I have a sister as well. They were very like, you can do anything, like real confidence. They constantly instilled confidence in us, and my mum is like a really strong character, a strong role model, and my dad was always very like, he would say stuff like, well, like I, for example, I've learned to drive really quick, and I will drive anything. I'd drive any vehicle. Like we had, big refrigerated transit vans at Mother Job, and I would drive it, no concern. Forklift trucks, again, I've not got my licence, so don't put that in. But
only in the yard.
Only in the yard, yeah. But yeah, I can drive all these kind of things. And my dad would say, you don't drive vehicles with your genitals. You can do whatever, you can do anything. So they just had that kind of confidence instilling. And it's funny because it's only when I just saw that as the norm, but it's only when you are around friends or you meet other people's parents. And I realized once, like, my parents would never like nitpick or criticize. They were always, and one thing they did, and I think I find myself doing this as a manager actually, they were really specific in their praise. So it was never just like, oh, well done, or oh, that was good, or they'd drip feed into me all the time what I was good at, and then I would own those things. And I knew, and it was different to my sister. So my sister had her own things that she was really good at, and I think it just, by the time I got to adulthood, I just had it in my head that they were my skills. And I think they just, without realizing, and I do it with my team, like I try not to just praise for praise's sake, but I'll be really specific and say like, you're really, so one of our designers, he's brilliant at taking what we've written as a strategy, picking out the kind of key things and then interpreting it, and he can come up with 5 different routes from that same strategy. And it's such a skill, and it's such a specific skill, but I want him to, every time he's handed a strategy, go, I know I'm the person for this, like I'm this guy. Like if this is given to me, I know I'll do the best job. And it's not cynical because I 100% believe it, but I want him to feel that that's what I think about him. It's not just, oh, you're a great designer. Like it's got to, and I think it just gives people that, it's like a magic feather, I suppose. It gives people that, it becomes a defining part of their character.
You've been mentioned that someone knows how to seize the day or maximize an opportunity, and there's a funny story behind that.
Oh God.
You became a celebrity overnight, didn't you?
Yeah. We're trying to bury this, Sean. Yeah, I had, some might say traumatic, some might say hilarious, some might say dark secret.
Was it international or national superstar?
International. I'm not sure superstar is the right use of the word, but I have a condition where I am really bendy, so I will show my condition. I can twist my feet backwards. I'm very bendy. It's called Ehlers-Danlos, which in terms of party tricks, absolutely brilliant. In terms of occasionally dislocating a joint, not so brilliant. So particularly when I was younger, I'm like, I should go say I'm like 102 days dislocation free. I'm not actually counting. But I don't dislocate stuff as much as I used to, but I did used to dislocate stuff quite a lot. And I hadn't for a few years. And funny enough, when I was at Ripple Effect, we went on a team meal out, and we went to, have you heard of Almost Famous, the burger place on Parr Street? And I ordered a burger called the Kids in America burger, which does come back, this part of the story. It's like a triple burger. And I literally went to bite it. I didn't even bite it. And I just felt like cramp in my tongue is probably the way to describe it. Like my whole head just went like cramp pain. So I just didn't eat it. And I didn't really, it didn't click to me that I dislocated my jaw. So I went home, went to bed, slept overnight, still didn't feel great. Got into work the next day and my colleague was like, your teeth aren't aligned. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, your bottom teeth is like out of line with your top teeth. I was like that.
And you didn't notice?
My whole head just felt like cramp in my head. It wasn't like, I couldn't work out what I'd done. So anyway, I ended up having to get a taxi to the hospital, and this really great doctor said, "Oh, you've got Ehlers-Danlos. I'm a specialist in that." Now that had never happened to me, and I dislocated, fingers, joints, shoulder, elbow, all sorts. I'd never met an actual specialist. So he put it straight back in. It's pretty grim. They had to stand behind me and like pull my bottom jaw out, and it went clunk. But the minute it did, like instant relief feeling.
Have you trained people at home to do this now?
I just have to not eat burgers. Cut it off at the source. So I went, anyway, my friend had just started working in the press office at the Royal. So I texted him and said, "Oh, do you know what? I genuinely had an amazing experience at the Royal. Like the doctor knew about my condition and that's never happened." And he said, "Oh, will you do me a quote? I'm going to do a press release about what an amazing experience you had with our expert doctor." And I was like, "Yeah, of course I will. That's absolutely fine." And it turns out, I've been told since through journalism contacts, that there was like horrific news at the time, like the Syria war, and there was all these awful things going on. And so the news were like desperate for like a light relief, and potentially any other week this story wouldn't have gone as crazy as it did, but it went everywhere. Like it just went absolutely
What was the headline?
mad. Woman dislocates jaw eating burger. Like it just, the worst thing was they photoshopped pictures of me. So I'd been to Farmageddon. Do you know Farmageddon, the like zombie thing? I'd been there a few weeks earlier, and I'm stood next to this like zombie thing, and I'm going, and they photoshopped a burger in my hand. So this picture went everywhere of me that isn't even a real picture of me, like eating a burger, and it was just absolutely terrible. But it was funny for like the first 2 days, but then it just went. It was just it got too much. Like, but it was in everywhere. It was in the Daily Mail, the Guardian. Like if you Google my maiden name, it's everywhere. I actually went to the extreme lengths of getting married to get rid of, to change my Google history. But yeah, and I got all sorts of weird things, like someone wrote me a poem, someone sent me a poem from Mexico, and it was in Spanish, and I thought, oh, how kind. And when I translated it, it wasn't so kind. It was a bit...
Japanese men loved you as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I had a lot of inappropriate messages as well, yeah. I also had some like really angry people. Like it turns out I'd angered the Ehlers-Danlos community. So I'm not sure how I'd manage that. So yeah, it was an interesting time, and for years I didn't eat burgers in public in case people didn't recognise me, and then the minute they saw me next to a burger, they thought, "Oh, I did that's where I know it from."
A schnitzel that time.
I did. I said I don't eat burgers in public. So yeah, it was interesting because I, at the time, worked in social media as well. So the Drum got me to write like a first person piece about what it's actually like going viral. And the thing is, nowadays...
Did it give you experience of how you could take that into your work environment or give some tips, or was it just by chance?
Not really, because you're so out of control of it and you don't know how it's going to go. The only element of control I got was the chance to write that article where I sort of got my side of the story back. What was difficult was, I think people... And to some extent, I was trying to laugh it off and go along with it, and it was funny and it was a funny story. But it became like hard because I think people thought I was courting it and I'd rung the papers and I'd asked for these photos, and so that's not really very, very me. Like I'm quite, like I would never have wanted to be famous. I've never wanted to be a celebrity, and I found that side uncomfortable. I found the thought that people thought I would have courted that or wanted that difficult. But the actual... I'm not that easy. I don't get very embarrassed very easily. I'm quite like, it was a funny story. I quite like having the funny story to tell. But it just, after a week or so, I had journalists at my house, like knocking at the door, and it was just mental. And you weren't making any money from it? No, well, I did make £100 of Chat magazine. But it wasn't worth it.
The purpose of this podcast is for people to gain value, lessons, direction, and you'll feel that they've learned something through my guests, and I can see by this that there's a lot of takeaways from it. Back to Poke and the strong future it has. It's starting to work with brands that maybe hadn't done a lot of marketing before. For example, me, I've had multiple successful businesses, and for me now, I think it's the right time where I have started to explore marketing, and it's a whole new unknown for me. And sometimes it's not easy to simplify, but if there was top 3, top 5 things that you would say that people that are entering the marketing space or want to continue with their brand? Is there any guidance or advice, or hopefully they'll all come to Poke, but even if they didn't, and they're all parts of the world or in different cities, or is there anything there that you think that's the takeaways that they should really?
Yeah, my definite most important would be is almost take a step back, I suppose. If you're a brand or an organisation, sometimes the goal is get a message out to those people straight away. And you're like, we want to do a campaign, we want to do a social media, we want to do an advert, we want to do a new website, and they want it done then. But good marketing can only shine a light on what exists. You can't market something, you can't successfully market, you won't have success with it if the product that's trying to be marketed isn't authentically what is being sold. So often that requires quite a deep sort of reflection on the part of the company, and it's definitely how we run it and how we work with. This is the process I was talking about at the beginning. So we do what we call a discovery phase at the beginning of any project, and it's kind of a non-negotiator for us that unless the client has done that work themselves, then they can give it to us. That's great. But we wouldn't just build a website with if someone came to us and said, here's the wireframes, we want this website. I don't think we're the right agency for that. What we are good at is really getting it. And I think this is my advice would be particularly for people who haven't done marketing before or very much entering into this kind of process. You need to understand who you are. You need to understand who you are as a business, what kind of your key selling points are, what your key products are, who you are as a personality, who the personalities are within that business. And then from that, you really need to understand who your audience are. You can't really have a one size fits all. I can't think of any business that only has one audience type. Everyone's trying to talk, even if you're thinking about your own staff versus your customers. If you have an organisation where you're telling your customers how great you are, but your staff hate it, that will come out. You've got websites like Glassdoor, and you've got you don't want your staff to be sitting there seeing adverts for your company thinking that is just not true, that's not reflective, because it will just bite you further down the line. So there's this element of strategy that has to be done to get everything in place. Now, there's no right and wrong answer, and there's no perfect company, but understanding all this means you get you find the right customers for you. Because if you do market just more generally and you get to the point where people are buying your product, if they're not the right customer, that's where problems come, and that's where friction happens, and that's where you get complaints, and then it's such a vicious circle, because instead of then having money to invest in marketing, you're investing money in customer service. So it's having that, putting value in that strategic part will really position you so much stronger once you get to the output part. So it is just kind of maybe taking a step back as to where, and interesting, we're finding the brands that come to us now, that's what they're looking for, and they're so open to that. It's not so much of a convincing process that maybe it was at the start. I don't know if that's because obviously people can see our case studies and how we've worked before, and we're more confident in our process and how we deliver it. But I also think that there is getting to be a better understanding of this process and marketing. And then my second thing again would be, I think I've mentioned this before, but a brand is so much more than a logo. So it's thinking about your entire experience. So if you are, say, for example, a restaurant, it's everything. It's the email the person gets when they've booked. It's the email when they've not been for 3 weeks. Like, how can you get them to come back? How do you treat your regular? We've all been in that position, haven't we? Where like the Groupon model, I think, as people often refer to it as, where you almost are punished for being a regular because they know they've got you, so they don't reward you in any which way. You get 50% off if you're a first-time customer. Well, is that fair on this person that gives you the business every week? So it's this whole brand experience. How do you reflect who you want to be as a business, and how does that run through every single stage? You'll even see it on websites where there's like broken link pages, and you'll occasionally see one that completely encompasses the brand. It'll be quite quirky or friendly or all the different things that brand is trying to be. So it's thinking of it as this whole picture. It's much more than just kind of that logo that people see. And I know this is a drum that we bang a lot, and anyone that kind of has any knowledge of poke is probably sick of hearing this from us, but it is so important that a brand isn't just a logo. Like we released some leaflets a few weeks ago that said McDonald's brand is not an M. Their logo is an M, but their brand is completely different than that. Like it's all about kind of fast service. They talk a lot about their high quality food, their relationship with farmers. They talk about, family time, all those things. That's their brand. So yeah, I think, and again, probably understand what is the right marketing agency for you. So again, another thing that I say a lot, and I think this probably, it goes against maybe money making, but not every agency is right for every client, and that isn't a problem, and that's not a negative, that's a positive. There should be, there's definitely clients out there that we are not the right fit for, and that's fine. That's not a criticism of us and our skill base, and it's not a criticism of them and their business, but it's important. It's a relationship. I talked about the Cathedral earlier. That was like a year-long project. But then we have other projects, like we worked with B&M on an internal branding project, and we worked with those guys quite intensely, but it was about 3-4 months. But even so, you're having so much contact with us during that period. You need to get on well. You need to be on the same page. You need to have the same vision. You don't want a scenario where you feel like you're working against your agency. It has to feel like everyone's on the same page. And so some of that is a personality fit, some of that is a skill set fit, some of that, and a lot of people tend to go for agencies that have worked in similar markets or fields. Again, I think that's a slight error. I think looking outside of your own sector is really important. That's where you'll learn the most lessons, because in reality, if you're just chasing your competitors, then you won't do as well. Like a really, really nice example of this actually is Lush. Lush don't look to other beauty industries for their strategy and approach. They look into food. They use the food industry as their kind of influence. So if you go into a Lush, it looks kind of like a greengrocer's, and the reason being they want their products to be associated with freshness and kind of health. And so they pull in the elements of food branding that do that, and it makes them completely stand out for the competitors. It's just a completely different environment when you go in. So if you are looking for an agency, say, for example, if you're like a financial organisation, don't just get caught up in thinking what finance experience have they got. Look at the project types. So if you're looking for like an internal branding project, it doesn't particularly matter if that agency's worked in your sector. It matters that they've gone into a company, understood, met everyone, really thought of it in a strategic way. Having a wide sector experience, like obviously there are industries where you really need that specialism, and I'm not doing that down, but I do think it probably should be low down on your list of things when you're trying to find the right agency.
For the people that don't know about Poke, it's just a delight to be part of the journey and be a partner in it. And so many people know my passion for Liverpool and how much it has to give, and I think Poke is a huge addition to the city. I only try and involve myself in businesses that I genuinely believe have longevity, that have a really good culture, and share the values that I have. And thank you for coming and joining me today.
Very welcome. We might not be friends after the burger story expose, but thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider watching some of our other fascinating chats here. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the latest podcasts, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell below.